Welcome to Speaking to Speakers, the podcast that brings together business leaders, coaches, keynote presenters, actors, voiceover talent, and anyone else who uses words and their voice to make their living. I'm Robert Mattson. Let's hear what they have to say. Today, we're fortunate to have Mr. Roderick Jefferson with us. Hey, Roderick.
Hey, how are you, man?
I'm doing well, pal, doing well. So thanks so much for joining us today. And I've been really excited about this, by the way. As what normally happens, I get a chance to chat with guests before we come on, and Roderick and I had a really fantastic talk. So we were terribly afraid this podcast would go for about 3.5 hours, but we're going to try to keep it to a reasonable period of time. So Roderick, we've had a number of different people, very varied backgrounds, but your background as an individual is incredibly varied. Could you share with the listeners what you do historically and what you do today?
Sure. I take a lot of pride in that. And a part of it is I'm an ADHD and ADD sales guy, so I can't really sit still well. So I'll blame it on that side. But also, I love just doing different things, and I'm a perpetual learner. So I started out in sales, and way back when, it was first real job, if you will, and kind of learned a lot. Jumped from there into sales training, sales enablement, things that I'm doing today, and I'll come back full circle to that. But along the way, I was a radio and television broadcast major, and I just fell in love with the mic and what came from being able to convey. It wasn't necessarily the spotlight of being there, but what came from being able to convey it. And so I actually, back in 2010, started my own voiceover company and started doing corporate things. And before I knew it, I was doing commercials and narrations, e-learning tutorials, all kinds of fun stuff. Well, I realized that while it's fun, that wasn't going to keep the lights on unless I was a major name of which I was competing against. And by the way, losing to. So decided to come back to my love of really sharing knowledge and teaching and jump back in the enablement space. And since then, I've started my own company around sales enablement.
And I took a look at your LinkedIn profile, just doing my homework. And when it comes to the great companies out there, you've worked for a number of them. I mean, people like Oracle and Marketo and Salesforce and PayPal. You've got a phenomenal history of these emerging technology companies that you've helped get them to where they are today.
I've been incredibly blessed and really lucky in some cases to be in the right place at the right time. And to those listening, do a lot of homework, figure out what's coming up next, what's the emerging space. And what I did was whatever was the next hot space, I wanted to be at the top winner. And I was very fortunate to have the great network, the great background, and it worked out nicely.
That's fantastic. And so, but now you run your own show. You're the CEO of Roderick Jefferson and Associates. What does Roderick Jefferson and Associates do?
Well, we're a community of consultants that I've brought together to really focus on doing two things with companies. That is helping them decrease time to revenue and increase sales productivity. But we do it a little different. As a global consultancy, we use AI and facial recognition technologies to help kind of analyze engagement behaviors in real time to help our clients, as I said, decrease that time to revenue and increase productivity. And I believe that we've got the combination of the most experienced people in the business and also the most trusted solutions in the market. And another thing that we always focus on is absolutely always coming back to revenue generating metrics. These results are time bound, they're metric focused. And what we want to do is equip the sales folks, the companies, the go-to-market staff with the strategy, the resources, and the skills that are required to drive sustainable and continued growth and ultimately revenue.
Well, that's fantastic. But it's not just you about the business person. Now, I wish that everyone could see what I can see because I'm looking at you in your office with all your sports memorabilia behind you. I want to put a little background to you that you were kind enough to share with me. So Roderick was an amazing athlete in his youth, and I'm sure still a fine athlete today. He's got you've got relatives who played in the NBA. You've played against a lot of NBA players. So, I mean, you're a guy who's grown up in the world of competition and was very successful as an athlete and now as a business person. So I think that's pretty amazing that you see that type of competition and your success go from, the hardwood to the boardroom.
Well, first of all, thanks for the accolades. That was a really long time ago and a bunch of surgeries ago. So I'm not that athlete anymore. But in all seriousness, I believe that is really the core foundation of what has helped to drive success in my professional life, is that competitive nature that comes from the sports, but also it's the teamwork and the success that's driven by collaboration and focused on a consistent single goal. And, people always say it takes a village. I'm going to add to that. I believe it takes a village of people that know their role and are able to then do that role in the context of the overall goal.
Well, and you know that I am a born and bred New Englander, so I've lived with the joy of being in Champion City, but also when I was growing up living in Losertown for many decades, and of course now we're known for the Patriots and do your job. So whether you're a Patriots fan or not, I think the theme of do your job is something that most people can get behind. But anyway, enough about our ancient sports history. Let's jump into speaking in general, because on this podcast, we've talked to a lot of people, and I've talked to them about how to speak. But a lot of times it's about the why to speak. What is your why?
My why is I've been very fortunate to have somewhat strong articulation, I like to believe, but more importantly, a focus on something that my mom taught me a long time ago, and that is you cannot move forward, not unless, but until you give back. In that learning cycle and being a perpetual learner, I believe we all have a responsibility to give back and share that knowledge. A lot of people kind of wrap their arms around things and say, I'm valuable because of what I know. I've taken the transverse of that. I believe I'm invaluable because of what I share. And it's about giving to give, not giving to get something back. And when I'm on stage, on podium, or wherever it may be, and I'm sharing information, it's my opportunity to give to that audience, and what they give back is the energy that makes me want to share even more.
Absolutely. I think that's part of the conversation that we have as speakers, and something I firmly believe in. And I think you give value before you get value. And if you do that, whether you believe it's a karmic thing, as long as you start forth and say, I'm just going to give out as much as I can, and good things will happen for me regardless, and I get to make the world a little bit better place. I firmly believe that if you just try to make the world a little bit better when you go to bed than when you got up, then it's a really good win for everyone involved.
You nailed it. It is an absolute win for everyone around you. And I also want to add this in because I'd be remiss if I didn't. I've had some incredible mentors and also incredible sponsors, as we know they're very different things, along the journey. And what they've done is they've modeled that give to give philosophy. Mm-hmm. I've learned from them, and now I'm taking that and trying to move that forward in the folks and with the folks that I mentor as well. And that also then relates to speaking. It's about sharing and giving everything you've got, and knowing that you said it best. It could be karmic, right? It could be the universe, but invariably things come back, and they come back tenfold.
And so, and I think that comes to a kind of a leadership mindset there's a lot of talk now about, the service leader, or the leader who serves. And, I always believed that whenever I was leading an organization or a team, it was all about, I work for the people that report to me. And that's what my goal was, is to give them guidance, keep blank off their heads, and to make sure that they had the space to do their job well. And I think that is something that serves speakers and leaders well.
It's interesting. That does seem to be a very popular topic lately. And I'd like to believe that I fall in that servant leader, and I'm working daily to get there for what's missing. But you nailed it. We work for the people that are on our team. And I've always taught my teams and shared with them, you don't work for me. We work hand in hand. I have done every job on this team, and I'm not afraid to go back and do it. I can't do it as well as you, so I need you. And it goes back to that village piece that I spoke about earlier. And I'd like to build that village of those people that know their roles and that are better at it, and or can help them grow into that next level. That's where all the fun starts, and that's where the rewards also come back.
Absolutely agree with that 100%. Now, you've got a bit of a split personality, because you not only work as an executive working with companies to try to help them sell better and be more effective. You also work as a keynote speaker. I know you've got a keynote coming up that you're prepping for that we discussed. But you told me during our pre-conversation that you ask one question when you start an engagement. Could you talk about that one question and why it's important?
Absolutely. That question is, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to coach, or do you want me to fix? And that's from working with folks that I've worked with on my teams. That's from the leadership teams I've been on. That's from everyday real life that comes to now working with clients. What it does is it allows a couple of things. One, it allows the other individual to drive the conversation, so you're not owning it. The other piece is it teaches you what set of ears to put on. As leaders, we're natural fixers. That's kind of what got us to that level. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it's, I just want you to listen, meaning I've got to get these things out of my head. Does it sound crazy, or have you seen this before? Am I way off base? I want you to coach. Look, I've tried a couple of things. You've got some experience that I don't have. You've also done some things. Have you seen this before, and how did you handle it? Now I want to add this caveat. How did you learn how to and how not to do it? Because I think there's value in both of those. And then the final piece is, hey, I just need you to fix. I've tried everything that I know. I've touched everyone in my network. Just tell me how to go get this thing fixed.
So the interesting thing there is when you talk about them owning the conversation, I disagree with you a little bit there, because by asking that question, and that is a well thought out and well structured question, that you have shown that you have experience in certain structures. A lot of really smart people, especially the creative types, those folks that are, one side of the brain versus the other, oftentimes they have so many great ideas that they don't know where to start and they don't know how to frame it. So I think in a sneaky way, you're actually giving them that structure that guides them to use their positive energy and their knowledge and put it into a structure that will enable you and them to get to a really productive ending.
Guilty as charged. There is some structure to it, but again, I go back to what I said earlier, and I love to agree to disagree, so I'll give you the other side of that.
Sure.
And that is, by giving that 3-step, it lets them tell me what they need. And then from there, I agree with you that I can then add in that structural piece once they tell me where they are. And sometimes organically through the conversation, you realize, hey, I want you to listen, but I really need you to coach. And invariably, it kind of grinds its way and it figures it out for all of us involved.
So oftentimes, so is there a transition sometimes where they say, oh yeah, I just need you to listen. And then at the end they go, oh no, I was totally wrong. I actually need the coaching.
Give me some ideas. I want you to listen. Okay, I've listened and I'm sitting here on pins and needles and I'm not going to jump in until I'm granted permission. But then sometimes they go, wait a minute, you've done this before. Did this work? Or how have you seen this is what I get a lot. What have you seen around this? And I'm like, before I step out of that box, let me know. I'm letting you know we're changing roles a little bit. And I think that's really what sets the bar, is making that transition of going, I heard you, I validate what you said, now let me share some ideas with you.
So that sounded very much as if it was a one-on-one conversation with you and another senior executive bouncing ideas. What about when you are a keynote speaker and you have to make sure that you are meeting the needs of the client? So whether it's an inspirational talk or a procedural talk, how do you go about that from that point of view where you're talking to a small group that is not your audience? Your audience is the larger group you'll talk to later. How does that process go about?
Well, it's in a discovery process. And let's be honest about that. It's all three of those. It's an and, it's not an or. When you're talking to your champion or your contact and you're trying to understand the audience, you're trying to understand the culture, you're trying to understand where does this keynote fit into the big picture, it has to be and. All three of those come into play.
Got it.
Let me hear what's going on. All right. Yep, I've seen this and I've worked with this before. And then thirdly, let me give you how it turned out well or not so well. And then let's figure out and merge all of those and figure out how to take the conversation from there. Yeah. Because otherwise it's kind of a one size fits all, right?
Sure.
I'll give you an example. Working with a chip manufacturing company for the keynote that I'm doing next week. It started out, I don't know the industry, so tell me about what's going on and let me know a little bit about the industry deeper than the research that I've been able to do. Tell me about your culture. The next is, okay, there's definitely information that I can relay that works across industry. Now we're talking about we've gone from listen to coach. So let me tell you some things. Does this play well here? Yes, use those pieces, or no, leave that out. And finally, the last piece is, if we don't touch on these specific things, now we're going to the fix part. If we don't touch these specific things, I don't think this is going to resonate with your folks. you've wasted money bringing me in. And also, it's probably going to push things further back culturally than where we get to. So do you see how the and came into play there?
Absolutely. I absolutely see the structure that you worked through there. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think when I think of the keynote speakers I've seen, and I've seen everyone from business speakers to, ex-sports stars to people that are adventure racers, all these different people. I saw the gentleman from 127 Hours that cut off a limb to get out of a rock slide he was in. So I've seen a lot of different speakers. I think one of the commonalities that they've put in is that, yeah, you're right, they've related it to what the audience is trying to get out of it, whether that audience is a business audience or an audience that just wants to get inspired. And I think they've taken what they do, because you can't change who you are. You've got your knowledge, you've got your topics, you've got your stories. Mm-hmm. But I think the good and oftentimes the best speakers are the ones who say, okay, how do I find the right connection? If you think about, the plumbing in your house, you have one size pipe to another. Okay, I need to have something that will join those two and make it work. And those people who can find those joints and those connections are the ones that I find most effective, because there's so much value in your knowledge and your history and the way you tell it, because we want to connect with you as a speaker. You're an interesting guy. You've got a great history. You've got great business experience and whatever you bring to the table. And that's the value. But it's the good speakers that can find how to connect that value to all these different scenarios that I think are really the most effective.
I'll boil it down to what has been the most fun and I think the most successful times that I've had giving keynotes. And it really boils down to one point. Mm-hmm. Stop giving presentations and start having conversations.
Absolutely.
Find what resonates, find what gets things going, tell stories, add some humor, and most importantly, we always talk about being authentic. I'm going to take it a step further than that. Be human. Mm. And that really is something that people can relate to. Look, fortunately, I've never had to cut off a limb to save myself from anywhere. But I do understand the fight or flight and the survival piece that came into play. And I also understand that he had to rationalize that when I'm done with this and I'm going to get out of it, it's going to happen. Failure is not an option. But he had to rationalize, when I get out of this, both mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, I'm never going to be the same person again. So now I have to not only figure out how to overcome what's going on in this current situation, but then how do I translate that into success? And I think that's when an audience grabs onto with the individual you were talking about.
Yep.
Let's bring it to a lower level, because I'm not cutting off any limbs, thankfully. But what I have to do then is find what's going to resonate with that audience. And I'm always a follower of threes. So when I put together a keynote, I come at it from this angle. What do I want them to think? What do I want them to feel? What do I want them to do?
Yep.
If I can hit all three of those, I'm going to walk away and I've touched someone in that audience. I have inspired someone in that audience. Mission accomplished. I can walk away feeling like, and I'll go back to your example earlier, the world's a little bit better when I go to sleep that night.
Absolutely. And I love the way you phrase it, as a conversation. Oftentimes when you're speaking in front of a crowd, they are not verbally talking back to you, but there's an inner monologue going on with them, and they're reacting to it. So the conversation is actually happening. They just don't have a mic. And
Absolutely.
So the more ways that you do it, and the interesting thing is that you're having one presentation stream of your content, but you could be having 15, 20, 100 different conversations, because they are reacting to it. It's resonating with the different people in different ways. It's just like if you heard a song, we would both hear the same song, but I would connect it with my personal story. You would connect it with yours. So the conversation is different from the sum of those two parts.
Mm-hmm. My wife always says the same thing. Every time I go off to give a keynote, she leaves me with this one piece right before I walk out the door. And she always says, go make a new friend. I translate that to, even for that duration of time that I'm talking with them and we're having that conversation, I have made a new friend for that time frame. And that new friend is every listener in the audience. If you can do that, you have now transcended being a presenter, and you're now a conversationalist.
When I coach people about the people that are nervous about speaking in front of a crowd, which is so not you, but when I talk to people who are nervous, I say, listen, you're not talking to 100 people. you're talking to one person 100 times.
You nailed it.
And I think that ties in with your make a friend, that you want to make that visceral connection with people. And I'm sure people come up to you at the end of it and act like they've known you, because they've just, like, as if you've been chatting with them personally and you've made a personal connection.
Yeah, it's a little scary sometimes, especially with LinkedIn, because they already have this picture of you and then they get you. But in all seriousness, it's the best feeling we can walk away from giving that conversation is, I made them comfortable enough. I resonated with them. I touched them enough to make them feel like this was a personal one-to-one conversation.
Absolutely. That is that magic moment where you realize that you've changed somebody. You've made a change in their world and you've affected them in some way.
It's kind of like golf, right? And golf can be one of the most frustrating sports on the planet. But all it takes is for you to find that sweet spot and get that one swing, that ball goes where you want it to. And you're like, yeah, I guess the rest of these 7 holes won't even matter, because I can go back to that one ping and that one sound and that one feeling. That's what we do. If I can touch you with that one thing, mission accomplished.
It's funny. I saw a post by a friend of mine whose young daughter hit the 3-pointer to win her game. And she is, I think, 10. And he posted it and the huge smile on her face. And I said, you know something? She's going to have that moment to go back to during tough times of success to carry her forward.
Well, we're human. We all need that, right? We need something that reminds us of success and something that worked well and something where we persevered and it actually worked out. Mm-hmm. Now, I also believe that you learn how to and you learn how not to. Either way you learn. So there's some big learnings that come from skin, knees, and elbows.
Oh, absolutely. Firmly agree. So Roderick, I mean, you do a lot of work in sales enablement, and most talks are, some kind of pitch, whether, that's to learn, to laugh, to persuade. Can you share some of the basic processes that you teach that help people, sales pros, be more effective?
Sure. The first, the one we were just talking about, and that is that you have to have a conversation, not give a presentation. You're in sales, you're here to sell something, but that doesn't mean you're always selling. The other thing I focus on is focus on the buyer's journey, not your sales process, not your sales funnel, not your sales methodology, but where do you fit into the overall sales, buyer's journey as they're moving along. Mm-hmm. The other piece is treat them like a partner from day one, and you'll never be viewed as a vendor. And finally, and I think the most important thing is, the old adage that still rings true to this day: people buy from people. Mm-hmm. If you can go in and you can show value, focus on key differentiation, competitive advantage, and business value. Now, as salespeople, we're very good at the first two. Here's a news flash, sales folks. Clients, prospects, they only care about the third, and that is business value. Here's how I always explain it, and that is, so Mr. and Mrs. Customer, what we sell are, well, all these bells and whistles, but at the end of the day, we can help you either increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain. And I don't care what you're selling. It could be umbrellas and flip-flops, right, to take it to its lowest compound. Umbrellas. I've got the umbrella. It's raining. I can still be productive. Flip-flops. The ground is hot. I can step on that ground. I decrease the pain. It does not change. I don't care where you sell. I've sold in a number of spaces. I've worked in enablement in those spaces. At the end of the day, how do you help them to increase productivity and efficiency or decrease pain?
I talk to people, and my background's product marketing. So I've been dealing with this for a long time. And I tell people that, there are certain aspects that people care about. Can I do it faster? Can I do it better? Can I do it cheaper? Or can I do something I couldn't do before? Show me one of those things and tell me a story about it. So don't just tell me don't tell me the speeds and feeds of your product. Tell me how someone used it to make their life better. A good client story that engages me and tells me, wow, that's someone who looks like me and their life is better now. I want to be more like that person. I mean, to me, that is often a very magic moment where you see people go, ah, yes, I learned something from you. And that's one thing. Salespeople should be teachers. I really believe that. They come from a background of, they talk to a lot of people. The difference between a salesperson and an industry analyst is not that great. If you've got someone who goes around and talks to a lot of different companies and learns their challenges and how they overcome them, there's a lot of knowledge that salespeople can bring to that table.
I agree with you 100%. I'll add in from my world, and that is the sales enablement piece, along with that analyst, along with that salesperson. And I think the string that ties all of them together is being a practitioner and being able to speak from experience and tell those stories.
Yep.
Right. An example, we talked sports earlier. You've got that coach that says, jump off your right leg, lift your left hand, let the ball roll off, and you do a left-hand layup. You give the ball to him and say, Coach, show me how to do that. And he says, well, or she says, the manual says, if you jump off your right leg, you lift your left hand. What credibility do they have?
Yeah.
Right. The same happens with the analyst. It happens with the salesperson, and it happens with the sales enablement professional. And that is, if you don't know the secret handshake and you have not walked in those shoes, I don't trust you to tell me how comfortable or uncomfortable they are, because you don't know. You're a theorist at that point. You've got to cross over to that practitioner world to be of high value to anyone you're working with.
Okay. So again, I'm going to give you a little pushback, because I've walked into many organizations and I've had to speak in front of a crowd. In fact, I remember speaking to a crowd 6 months into my journey of learning about compensation management. Now, I've never been an HR professional. I've never been a comp professional, but I had to do a talk to a bunch of comp people that knew the topic way better than me. So the approach I took was I went around and I talked to as many experts as I could. And I opened up the presentation with, I'm not a comp professional. I'm a marketing guy. So already you don't believe me. But let me tell you something. I talk to a lot of comp professionals, and I want to share with you what I've learned from them. So if you can't become a practitioner, learn from them and share their stories, because you can be a conduit for knowledge. And I think you're absolutely right. If you can become a practitioner, that's fantastic. But sometimes you have to be humble enough to realize I'm not going to get there, but I can still learn from the experts and pass along what I've learned.
I love that you were humble enough to put that out, and what you instantly did. And we're going to go back to what you said I did. And there's the process of kind of nudging folks. What you did was completely disarmed that audience by saying, I don't claim to know as much as you. Matter of fact, I'm here to learn from you. But I have done my homework, and I'm humble enough to say that I'm trying to learn from you and from others so that I can be better, and then take my experience and add that in, kind of like a gumbo, if you will, and make all of us bigger, faster, and stronger. There's some value in it.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. All right. So again, I know that we could go on for a long time. I would like to close with one thing, because as a speaker and as someone who people come to see speak, you're a great communicator. But who are your favorite communicators, and what makes them so special?
No, there are a ton of folks. I look at some of the old mentors I have, and I always like to bring folks in close. I can give you the big names, but I want to personalize it for you.
Sure.
Tom Mendoza from Network Compliance was probably the best speaker I've ever seen, because he was just sharing experience and telling stories. Bill McDermott from SAP, another mentor. Bill's phenomenal on stage because he's relatable. Now, he's probably the closest thing to a Kennedy that I've ever met. There's that relatability that pulls you in, right? I look across the board as one of my partners, Ed Ross. Ed amazes me every time that I see him speak to a client and he's up in front of a group, because he speaks with such articulation and credibility that it pulls you in and draws you in and makes you want to learn more. Another one is a buddy of mine, John Barros. John is one of those, he's from Boston, and he's got that Boston edge, but you know what? Yeah. He doesn't apologize for it, and he incorporates that. He's like, here's who I am, here's what you're getting. I describe John kind of like college and marriage. A great institution, but not meant for everybody. So, I mean, I could go on for days. And for those that I didn't name off, I apologize. I'm trying to get it out there. But those folks really inspire me. I'll put one more in there.
Sure.
Morgan's phenomenal and works along with John Barros. And what's great about Morgan is the fact that he came up as an SDR and never apologized for not being the most senior and tenured person. And he talks from experience of what he's doing today. And he's found his niche market that needs to know how to do what he does and share that. And that's Morgan Ingram. So I want to make sure that I get that out there correctly. Morgan says, here's who I am.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, I did what you're doing not long ago. So I'm not talking about something in ancient history. You can learn from my successes and my mistakes right now.
The one commonality to me is always about credibility and passion. If you bring those two things to the table, whatever your topic is, I just want to know that you're passionate about it and that you know enough that you can teach me something. And that is a great thing. It might just be one thing. If I learn one thing from any talk, I think I won.
To use your words, you go to bed better that night than you did when you woke up.
That is the goal. Again, I could probably talk to you for about 14 hours and just be sitting there going, oh, I learned something new this hour. But I'm sure that our listeners
require cocktails. I'm telling you that now.
And I'm buying. So that would be great. Roderick, I'd like to thank Roderick Jefferson from Roderick Jefferson and Associates. Just a great font of knowledge. And if you get a chance to see him speak live, please do. You'll walk out a better person. Roderick, thank you so much.
Truly humbled, and I'm honored. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. Speaking to Speakers is sponsored by ITM Speakers, helping executives, sales staff, and subject matter experts become more effective and persuasive communicators. Learn more at itmspeakers.com.